I'd like to call to order the January 13th, 2022 meeting of the Woodland Park Planning Commission. Karen, could you take the roll, please?
Sure. John DeVoe. Ken Hartsfield,
Here.
Lee Brown,
Here.
Al Bundy, Carol Harvey. Here. Ken Kennedy,
Here.
Larry Larson,
Here.
and Sean Marie Nielsen. Here.
Okay, say welcome, Ken.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Our newest member of the Planning Commission, Ken Kennedy, joining us for the first time tonight. So welcome.
Thank you
Good
so
to have
much.
you.
Nice to meet you all.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands
One nation, under God, indivisible.
justice for all. Thank you. Well, the next item on our agenda is election of officers. And Karen, can you update us on Mr. DeVoe's status?
Yes, he and I spoke yesterday, and it was with a heavy heart that he informed me that he has decided it is time for him to step down off the planning commission. Even with 1 year remaining in his term, he just felt it was time and appropriate for him to no longer continue service in this capacity. So he's obviously not here this evening. I'm expecting his resignation letter here in the next day or two. And so I would say that he is not a viable candidate for any office on the commission. So with that, as you look at your elections this evening for a chair and vice chair, you're not going to be able to look to him and his leadership that he has provided for many years, I understand. So, but I understand you've got folks here amongst yourselves that are more than ready to fill those roles. So I look forward to hearing what you choose to do.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Ken as their chairman for the year 2022.
I'll second that.
That
Thank
kid
you.
there, correct?
Will you clarify which Ken?
Oh, you, sorry.
All right, thank you. Well, we got a motion in a second, so I guess we'll take roll call.
Sure.
Voting.
I'm sorry, I'm running out of call. I've not had to be this detail oriented before, so I'm rusty, so bear with me here. Lee Brown,
Yes.
Al Bunky, oh, he's not here, sorry. Carol Harvey,
Yes.
Ken Kennedy,
Yes.
Larry Larson,
Yes.
Sean Marie Nielsen,
Yes.
and Ken Hartsfield.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your vote of confidence. Look forward to serving the next year, but we need a vice chair.
I make a motion that Lee Brown be our vice chairman.
I'd be glad to second that. And so if we take another vote, Mr. Brown.
Carol Harvey,
Yes.
Ken Kennedy,
Yes.
Larry Larson,
Yes.
Sean Marie Nielsen,
Yes.
Ken Hartsfield,
Yes.
and Lee Brown.
Yes.
Well, very good. Congratulations, Lee. Well, next item is to approve the minutes. Trust you've all had the opportunity to review those.
Move to approve. I'll second.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good, thank you. Taking us to public hearings. PUD 2021-02 a request for a 2-year extension on the time limit to begin construction on the Best Western Hotel in Gold Hill Square. We have staff presentation.
We do. Good evening. I understand that you all have seen this particular proposal on several occasions. It is a request from Bill Page for a 2-year extension on the time limit to begin construction of the Best Western Hotel in the Gold Hill Square South Building number 6, PUD Zone District. And this is under our municipal code section 18-30-050. Bear with me, I'm figuring out dashes versus dots and a few other
Doing fine,
nuances
Karen,
and
thank you.
shifting gears here. With that, there were previous approvals granted by Planning Commission and the City Council. It was specifically back in January of 2016 when the Planning Commission first approved this particular PUD for a 70-room hotel at this location. And then it was in February that same year when City Council approved the dimensional standards associated with this development. 2 years later, Mr. Page came back and requested a 2-year extension. And that was granted by City Council, which took him through to February of 2020. And then in that time period, he came back and again requested another 2-year extension. And that was heard by the Planning Commission and approved by City Council to go through the year 2022, which brings us to date. So there was an initial approval for in a 2-year window to make or begin construction. And then there have been 2 subsequent 2-year extensions. So this project has been as a proposal for a number of years now. And so to help orient everyone, we have a couple of slides here. This is an aerial of that particular area, and you can see outlined in yellow where the proposed hotel site is. And this is over in that same area where the city market is, further down here by the number 221. And you can see where Gold Hill Place comes into this particular development. So it's this building here with the proposed hotel that we're talking about. The next slide is the actual final development plan for the PUD. And that gives a more detailed site plan, again, showing in yellow where that Best Western Hotel site would be developed in that building 6. And then this next slide provides some illustrations of what the facades of the structure would look like, showing both the southwest and the north elevations for this particular project. Back in 2016, when this was first looked at, the Planning Commission made some findings related to this planned unit development, specifically that it was compatible with the surrounding uses and development pattern and consistent with the 2010 comp plan and the 2016 zoning and other regulations. It was a logical proposal of logically going to develop the area with all necessary infrastructure improvements and services. It was determined to be in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare of the Woodland Park citizens and visitors, and that there were no adverse or unmitigated impacts to the site, the natural environment, neighborhood, and it was a benefit to the community. So when we look at this proposal through today's lens, so what, 6 years later, we need to look and just kind of see what's changed, what hasn't during this time period. And so to date, there are no new development standards that have been adopted by the city since the Best Western PUD amendment for lodging use was approved in 2016 and extended in 2018 and 2020. And the general circumstances and conditions remain unchanged, except the city did update the comprehensive plan, and that was adopted just at the end of 2021, this last year. This project does continue to be consistent with that new updated plan. And then sections of the municipal code, including 18.30, the planned unit development regulations, those are currently under review. And while there's not been changes to them to date, there may be changes in the future here as we continue that review. And those changes, should they occur, may in turn affect these previous entitlements for this project. Other things that have changed since the original proposal is the 65+ room microtel was constructed and began operations in 2020. And then within this particular building, Merit Academy began occupying part of the property here just this month. They actually entered into a lease about 6 months ago and have been making renovations on that lower level of the structure for their occupancy. Oops, sorry, wrong button. And so with that, the conclusion that staff has at this point is since there is not a specific development standard for staff to evaluate, there is not a strong staff recommendation or opinion. Extensions really are at your discretion. So should the Planning Commission find that an extension is warranted and recommend that City Council grant the 2-year extension, the approving resolution should state that the development is still subject to all the conditions and dimensional standards specified within the original approval of PUD 15-001 that was issued in January of 2016. That particular language and standard is something that has shown up in the subsequent 2 extensions. So it just ties things back to that original approval. So there's not any ambiguity between what the original approval is versus where we are today. That's the presentation.
Well, thank you, Karen. Any commissioners have questions for staff?
Yeah, for staff, if there is a revision of our PUD conditions in the code based on, assuming the recommendations of our consultant for the comp plan, this project would no longer be subject to new conditions. It would still be subject to old conditions.
I believe that is accurate. I think the issue would be if he does not start construction or finish getting his permits here within this 2-year window, he would potentially come back for another extension. And at that point, we would need to be looking at those dimensional standards again, that it may be very realistic for the commission to say no at that point to reapply and be reevaluated under those standards. And this is where I am rusty and potentially need a legal determination is if those standards have changed to any substantial degree, like a year from now, if we have new updated standards, if those are substantially different from what this original PUD approval was, what happens in that interim period. I would imagine worst case scenario, we're back, worst case for the developer, we're back double checking with Planning Commission and City Council about changes there.
And I don't recall, there is no limit on the number of extensions for a PUD.
Correct, there is no limit.
They're only allowed for a 2-year period.
Correct.
The original approval.
Was a
Was
2-year
allowed for
period
2 years.
also.
Any other questions? Mr. Brown? No?
Yeah, let me just clarify one thing, a couple things, I guess. The Sherwin-Williams lease, the staff write-ups, I think it said it went through the summer. Do we know when is that?
Let's
Is it beginning?
comment from the owner. Maybe he can address those more clearly. So, and staff have any input on that at this point?
I do believe Mr. Page is going to be the best one to be able to talk about the length of his leases, where they are.
Is Mr. Page here today?
Yes, he is.
Did,
Shortly.
did he have some comments? Might be useful to hear from him before, at least I'm happy to have him comment.
Yes, we anticipate having him address the
All right.
board.
Well, let me mention why I asked the dates too. It's based upon, all right, as I understand it, the problem the problem in the original case was that Mr. Page felt that he had an arrangement with Sherwin-Williams where they would have provided an alternative space so that he could go ahead. That fell through for reasons, the details of which don't really matter. It did fall through. Sherwin-Williams has at least sometime in 2015, I gather, the third quarter.
Let's ask questions of staff that they can answer reasonably, and then we'll hear from Mr. Page, and then we can ask him questions that might have better input on. But I think you're correct in the history that you quoted. Any other questions for staff?
So I just wanted to circle back around and I just wanted to make sure that I understood you correctly. So if they don't make the 2024 cutoff with everything that they need to, then we're thinking they might have to reapply then? Or can they go ahead and just do yet another extension?
They could apply for another extension,
Okay,
and then you
because there's no
all,
limit, right?
correct,
Okay.
you all would look at what's going on at that point. Have we updated our regulations in a way that you feel it'd be better if he just came
Maybe
back with a new application?
Okay.
Or is it a case of applying for a change to the dimensional standards within the PUD because of the changes that might have happened there? My crystal ball isn't so good, in terms of like what changes we potentially make to the regulations. There may not be many, maybe nothing that impacts this, and maybe some substantial things. So at that time, that would be looked at in terms of what is the best approach to help Mr. Page navigate the City of Woodland Park regulations towards seeing his project come to fruition.
Perfect, thank you.
Anything else for staff? Would ask applicant, Mr. Page, you could address the commission. Good evening.
My name is William Page. I'm the applicant here and I'm the primary owner of Gold Hill Square South LLC. I'm the managing member.
Good evening.
I'm not sure I caught all the questions from Mr. Brown because of the sound, the way it was coming through. I have hearing aids and I had to adjust them to,
Well, let's start with, did you have anything to add to staff's report? Or any comments you'd like to make about the project?
I don't think I might add that I started negotiations with Sherwin-Williams about 2014 about building a new store. And those kind of went, we planned a new store on a lot we own south of City Market. And went through their engineering department and got approval. That was in Texas. We ended up dealing with the real estate department in San Francisco. And Sherwin-Williams has 4,300 stores. They're like dealing with a big bureaucracy as far as approvals and different levels, and it's like an octopus with tentacles. And we got down to the putting a lease agreement together on a new building, and the real estate office in San Francisco bought. And they were so busy at the time doing new stores, they didn't want to entertain a relocation. And so we had been working with Best Western that had done a market study and so on about 6-7 years ago. So that's how this got into a delay process. And actually, their lease is up in 3.5 years. And that's when my lease and lease options expires with Merit Academy. So if the market conditions return where it's economically viable to build this hotel in Woodland Park, it's more of an upscale hotel than the two existing hotels. So Sherwin-Williams probably did me a favor because I've been building this hotel probably about the time, trying to open about the time COVID hit a couple of years ago, so. So, you know, it's just one of those situations that happens in business and so on, so. That's some background.
Fine, thank you. Nothing further. Mr. Brown, maybe you had some questions you'd like to address, Mr. Page?
Well, it was vague, but I think you still got the answer. The Sherwin-Williams lease goes through third quarter of 2025. Is that correct? You have a specific date?
You talking about Sherman Williams or Merritt County?
Merit Academy, from the staff material, said there's options through June 30th of 2025. I just asked if what's the Sherwin-Williams date?
It's about, I think, 30 or 60 days behind that. Did you get my answer? It's like 30 days later than when the Merit Academy. But, you know, nobody knows what's going to happen with Merit Academy, and, you know, these, you should read all the.
All right. The reason I was trying to clarify the dates, sir, as it stands now, based upon, it appears the next time you would have an entitlement to be able to develop this is third quarter of 2025, which means you need not just an approval, an extension today for 2 years, but an extension in February 2024 for another 2 years. And in fact, only have several months before that extension ran, unless things were started, you'd probably have a further extension required as well.
You know, that's, it all depends on the economic situation and so on. I'll
Okay,
definitely
so,
be back in 2 years to talk to you all.
okay, well, that's, yeah, but I'm saying you'll need at least that, but unless you can build within a matter of a few months after the leases end, you'll need 2 extensions, even assuming market conditions are
Oh, no. No, I still have good communications with Sherman Williams. They're a good tenant. They pay their rent on time. And if, you know, it just depends on market conditions. It's not economically feasible to construct a hotel in 3.5
course.
years. I'd probably be talking with Sherman Williams about staying. And the other thing, if Merit County, you know, they don't want to commit to 2 years, and I understood that with their situation. But if they need to stay longer than the 3.5 years, I would put their priority first.
Any other commissioners have questions for Mr. Page? Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate your input.
Yeah.
So we'll like to open up to public commentary. So anybody sign up, David? Anybody in the audience wishing to speak? You're welcome to come up. Seeing no one interested, I guess we'll close the public comment and open discussion among commissioners.
Well, my comment would be that the long pole in the tent is really not that obvious. I mean, Mr. Page does have 2 3.5-year leases that could go away. But regardless, he's not ready to start a hotel now. So with no limitation on extensions, short of a change in our regulations and codes, there really is no reason not to give him the extension.
I had a question for staff, and I think you may have answered it earlier. So the changes that you may anticipate to the PUD ordinance, very vague and unspecific at this time. There's nothing in mind that would address this development situation.
And I have, you know, just a nanosecond worth of information on this coming in at the very end. I've sat in on a couple of meetings with Logan Simpson, and I've not seen any true feedback from them yet, but they are really looking at helping or making suggestions around updating things to more contemporary parking standards, flexibility within those standards. And that's just one example. How that would play out for this particular development and what specifically gets proposed and ultimately adopted, I do not know.
Okay,
But that's just an example of things that could potentially impact this kind of development.
Yeah, my concern would be that Mr. Page be surprised by some drastic change in the regulation, but it doesn't sound like that will be the case.
I'm not aware of anything in terms of us being grossly out of sync with the rest of the development world. And even then, it still boils down to what works for our community. That's one of the lovely things about Colorado is that we do have that degree of local control in setting up our regulations for what we want our community to look like.
I too will support this request.
so in 2 years' time, when we visit with Mr. Page again, if we have some code changes, we could put those conditions onto the extension, or would it have to be a rejection of the PUD and ask them to reapply?
If he's applying for permits to do the development, we would be looking at what are those standards, have things shifted. And so he may be needing to request from council changes to those standards with his approvals. I believe that's the mechanism we have in place. I'm still learning our codes. If he's looking for an extension, you all may decide, well, no, we don't want to extend the existing approval. We think things have shifted enough that it's best that you reapply. And that proposal gets evaluated under those rules.
And
I believe those are the two potential paths.
so if we wanted to put conditions on the extension, that's not allowed. We'd either have to approve the extension as it was originally submitted or reject it and ask for reapplication with new conditions.
That's the two paths I'm able to
Okay.
articulate right now. It doesn't mean there isn't a third option that I'm at a different point that are able to come up with from talking to legal counsel. Great technical questions. Clearly, I need to do more homework.
I think it's most important that Mr. Page understand there may be a need for a brand new application, but really would not be a negative against his application. It's just that our regulations may have changed enough for him to reapply.
And like I said, I believe based on how things are structured right now, that could be accomplished through just a change to the dimensional standards or requesting council to approve that type of shift within a change to the PUD.
I had a couple things. First, and I comment for staff too. The reason why I'm somewhat familiar with the history is I did look back from previous planning commission meetings on YouTube. I note that those were referenced in the staff material, so I assume that's proper matter to be considered as part of the public hearing, or as part of the review process, part of the record. I appreciate referencing those sorts of things in, because otherwise we have a problem that the record doesn't contain things which even matter to the public. So I appreciate that staff does reference that in their staff report. The second area is, I'll say this, what would have been the second comment, I think, is Commissioner Harvey's sort of address, as well as generally my thoughts. Third is more sort of a general comment, some little bit of exasperation here. I know it's a lot of work to put an application like this together. It's also a lot of work to have at a minimum 4 extensions with 4 public hearings from the Planning Commission to extend this, and 4 public hearings from the City Council to extend this. And it'll only be 4, assuming that in a matter of months from the time the 2 leases or lease options run out, that it started, or it would be yet 2 more hearings by each people, by both Planning Commission and by City Council. it would seem to me if we understood this at the time back in 2018, I wasn't here. I'm not sure we would have gotten into this process. Surely the intent here isn't to have 4 to 5 2-year extensions of this to see if it's still economically viable. I guess at this point, we're already in for a penny, in for a pound. You might as well let it go and see if anything comes up. But it's not really a satisfactory situation, and I'm not sure if anybody has any thoughts on that. But I guess the main point is I expect the commission will probably recommend that it be extended again. If there are some changes, the commission should be should make sure Mr. Page understands that that if there are changes, those changes will be required, and the fact that we've extended this for this many years should not create any presumption on his part that changes before the next extension will not be required to be put in a new PUD plan.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? And we'll be looking for a motion.
Move to approve PUD 2021-02, a request by William L. Page for a 2-year extension of the time limit to begin construction of the Best Western Hotel in the Gold Hills Square South Building number 6 in the planned unit development zone district pursuant to Municipal Code 18.3.050.
I'll second it.
Oh, before we did, Carol, did you want to add in the recommended language from the staff that the development is still subject to all conditions and dimensional standards specified in the original approval of PUD 15001 in January 2016?
Yes, I'm not certain that it's necessary, but we may just have it on the record. So I will amend my motion to include that wording. And I see Karen trying to remember what you just said.
No,
It was on her last slide that said conclusion. That's what she said. That it should, the approving resolution should state, and it had a sentence.
Okay, got it. So moved.
Who seconded the initial motion, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Kennedy, a second again. Very good. We ready for a vote?
Yes, sorry. Larry Larson,
Yes.
Sean Marie Nielsen,
Yes.
Ken Hartsfield,
Yes.
Lee Brown,
Yes.
Carol Harvey,
Yes.
and Ken Kennedy.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. That concludes our public hearings for this evening.
See you in 2 years.
Yes, Mr. Page. I'll see you then.
Yeah, Mr. Page, please understand, no, there's no bad feelings. We understand you got in a situation that things continued on, and it's unfortunate. I wish the process worked better, more smoothly, so it didn't require both the city, the planning commission, city council, and you to keep hearing this every 2 years. Good luck with the future of your development.
Takes us to reports. Karen, staff have any?
I do have a number of things I wanted to touch base on here this evening. The first is in front of you here at each of your seats, and we'll get this information to you, Mr. Brown. I apologize. But you have in front of you the December report from the Planning and Building Department, and it gives you where we were for our statistics. And since it was the end of the year, you're able to do a full year comparison between 2020 and 2021. Let's see, our development applications as a whole were up quite a bit from 29 to 46. Single family residential permits were on par with last year, 38 and 41 for this past year. The multifamily residential permits were up considerably. From 2020, we were at 8 to 16 this past year. And overall, our total planning activity, we went from 309 last year to 375 in 2021. And under the building permit activity, let's see, we were Everything says 2021. Oh darn, I can't do a nice year-over-year comparison there. But you can see, you get a good snapshot for where we were for the month of December and then for the year as a whole. So I apologize, I can't give you a comparison from the prior year. So you have that in front of you, and then the other item is the Colorado Municipalities magazine. And within this magazine, there's two things that you may find interesting. One is just how a bill becomes a law in Colorado. Sometimes that can be interesting in terms of especially the trickle down that we get here. The most recent example of that was the changes to the home daycare. So that went through its own process at the State House before it got to us for changes we needed to make. And then there's also an article in here related to Colorado's new water plan 2.0, in terms of how the state's trying to do a better job of planning for our limited water resources and where that all goes with all the competing uses here in our state. So those are the two handouts today. And then in terms of other reports, the work with Logan Simpson on our contract with them related to the comp plan and the code update. They have finished the comp plan, and we actually asked them to finish taking care of a couple of little minor I dotting, T crossing kind of things, so we could get that up on our city website. And they are finishing up their review of our code and making recommendations on that. And so it'll be here in another week or two when a memo comes out that our city attorney, Nina Williams, and I will have an opportunity to take a look through that. At this time, I'm anticipating that it would be late April before we really start diving into that in earnest in terms of what are those recommendations, any type of process around working through those suggestions. That gives me a little bit more time to continue to come up to speed on just all things Woodland Park and just kind of get running a little better than I have been here. So I think that timing will work well for all of us. And then related to that, it's kind of a subset is the concerns over short-term rentals and what do those look like. We've definitely been in conversations with Logan Simpsons around that. And then here at a staff level at Woodland Park, our city manager, Michael, has been kind of leading internal staff in terms of looking and evaluating that issue. What are just the number of short-term rentals, where are they located? Any other type of data that we can look at and evaluate around those particular uses here in our community. So that's where we are. It's actively being worked on, but not quite ripe to come back for any type of feedback from a group such as this. So.
A question on that issue. We, as a commission, at least those that were attending in the meeting where we had a constituent talk about his concerns with short-term rentals, we, as a commission, said it's something that we should take the lead on. I know since then the city council has also talked about short-term rentals. Although I appreciate that Logan Simpson will give us an overview of their code review and recommendations in April. Is it possible that one of their short-term rental experts could address a work session to the council and the commission prior to April? We're behind the power curve in terms of other communities in Colorado that are addressing short-term rentals in their communities. We at least should be able to hear what their thoughts on short-term rentals might be and a recommendation on a way forward for us in terms of legislation or regulation.
That may be a possibility. In fact, I made a note of it. And like I said, this is where I'm still kind of learning a few things. And I'll definitely be taking that back to the city manager, as that group is working on that. So.
I'm in a position now, I don't know what I don't know about short-term rentals, except I don't want any in my neighborhood, but that's my personal preference. But I know that Logan Simpson had expressed that they had some expertise in that area, and a workshop where we're just educated would be very helpful before April.
Okay. I
Can
will,
can I amplify Commissioner Harvey's comment? Like when the commission spoke about it, in fact, seemed to be a consensus that in January, this would be one of the first things on among our agenda, was to have a work session to address this topic. A separate comment to just to get some feel for what we're talking about in April. When I raised the question with with Sally many months ago at a commission hearing regarding this update, my impression was that primarily what was doing is the reorganizing of the ordinances to combine chapters 16, 17, and 18, and irregularities as such, where some things are 2 year to extend, some things 1 year. That would be an example. We would make them consistent. As I've heard a few other comments about it, it sounds like we may be talking about something much more substantive. It is in fact more intended than putting, reorganizing and clarifying irregularities, or is there something more substantive in mind here?
I said, not seen anything in writing back from Logan Simpson, and to your comments, yes, they are looking at overall structure, cleaning, organizing, combining those chapters. But there were, I believe, a number of places where, Sally and the consultant had been talking about our parking standards too stringent, that we require way more parking than what is truly necessary, or how do we potentially incorporate more flexibility within our standards. So depending upon uses and shared parking agreements, and that there may be ways to support development and still meet the needs of our community. And what does that potentially look like? So there's potentially I guess a few other things that come back as recommendations that we had not previously anticipated.
Lee,
I would.
there was a schedule that Logan Simpson had published, actually, I think back in October, and they had proposed delivering to the city by December a discussion of parking and downtown overlay, and then the design guideline recommendations, and then finally, specifically, short-term rental recommendations. And I had anticipated we would see something on that in December. And I understand, schedules are flexible, but I would certainly like to see something on short-term rentals before April.
Yeah, I don't know the best way to do this, but I guess we'll see what comes. But it seems to me we're talking about two things of a different character. One, reorganizing, putting it together in a new chapter, which has common definitions and the like, and clearing up things that don't match up well, and substantive policy areas. And it's almost like we should handle those differently. There's one, reorganize it, and then there's a separate set. If we try and do everything at once, it gets very difficult to get everything approved. If some people have an issue with one item, everything gets bollocksed up. It's some of the specific areas mentioned, those seem to be topics worthy of discussion. And a separate important discussion should our ordinance be revised as far as its structure? At least that's an observation. I guess the answer is we're going to see what the staff and the consultant come up with. It seems we may be creating a very difficult problem for ourselves, and perhaps focusing on several substantive issues separately on perhaps starting with short-term rentals would be useful to make things items that are of a size that we can bite off at one time.
No, I agree. I think I am somewhat disappointed that the code review was almost like an afterthought. I know it was a very important part of their contract, because Larry and I were there in the beginning when their contract was let. But it almost seems like, oh yeah, we forgot, we've got to do this code review. And the code review is multifaceted. The subject of short-term rentals is just part of it. It's the structure of our code, it's specific topics. I don't want to shortchange any of those. But I do know that there is an appetite within the community to address short-term rentals. I don't want to push it to the forefront and ignore those other very important aspects. But again, I will just reiterate, I would like to see some type of workshop where we're at least given a broad brush understanding of short-term rentals in Colorado and the issues and things that we can do in this community.
Yeah, I agree. And I say, if we try and do them all at one time, I'm afraid it becomes unmanageable.
And I've heard all of your messages and, you know, I being so new, I feel like I'm a little bit in the dark. And, you know, once I look at what the consultant comes back with, you know, that would give me a better idea in terms of how do we best look at all these things. And it may be exactly what you all have been talking about here, that combination of needing to perhaps look at this in a couple of smaller projects, that there's some standards that need to be looked at and implemented, such as short-term rentals, or then there may be the overall structure of the regulations that need to be looked at, and like I said, the order that those get handled and how once we know what those recommendations
It's
are.
possible too that Logan Simpson does not take the lead in a workshop for the council and the commission. It may be our own city attorney or the folks that work with him to give us that understanding. I just thought we
Yeah.
had an opportunity with Logan Simpson, but not if it clouds the overall picture of code review.
Okay. So, but I do have down very clearly that you all are interested in a workshop, possibly jointly with city council on
Yes.
what does regulation of short-term rentals in Colorado potentially look like. And there are, you know, a variety of ways that different communities are tackling that. And then, of course, you know, once we have information back from the code consultant, we'll be looking at what does that mean for us going forward and perhaps embracing their recommendations.
I'd like to recommend that we look at this as two different parts. One is the overall changes to the code that's being proposed by our consultant. And let's be true to our previous discussions about let's attack short-term rentals as quickly as we possibly can, knowing, I think it'd be helpful to know what the city council's opinions on some of the issues that we'll be dealing with, listen to them. Sure be helpful that they could listen to us as well.
Okay.
But I think we should look at two separate things, Karen. Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Lee?
I do.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was hearing. So thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
So, and then if we're good with all that, the last thing that I on my list that I wanted to suggest was I understand from all of the various meetings and workshops you guys did through that whole comprehensive planning process that there was considerable appetite, shall we say, for meeting a little bit earlier. And so wanted you all to contemplate us adjusting our meeting time to 6 p.m. It'd still be the same date in the month, you know, regularly, but that little bit hour earlier, staff has a desire for, but you know, we respect what the commission's preference is. So just wanted you all to think about that. We could put that on the agenda next time if you guys want to have more of a chance to talk about it after you've had a chance to think about it, or I don't know what your preferences are. The next meeting, we do definitely need to meet at 7 though, because it was noticed that way. So
Discussion next time. And when is our next meeting?
27.
January 27th at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Karen. Commissioners have any comments or statements they'd like to make?
I'd just like to ask Karen, after working for the city now for what, almost a month?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had 5 weeks, I think.
Yeah. What are your initial impressions of how we do our planning business.
The one that was very loud and clear to me was Sally has done a tremendous job for this community over the years, especially for someone who did not have formal training in the field of planning. She is incredibly knowledgeable, has worked with this community in wonderful ways to put things in place here that I think help Woodland Park hold on to and define, you know, what you guys look like now. Some of that is the design guidelines, the flexibility and yet standards that you apply to development. That helps in terms of making sure that there is adequate parking, what things look like, how the community comes together. No, just done a beautiful job over the years, and that's a tribute to anybody who sat on this commission and city council also to very seriously contemplate and evaluate what comes before you and what's best for the community, and yet how do we support private development. The staff is also tremendous. Dave and Dory. And then Amy coming back to work there in the department, incredibly knowledgeable, very blessed to have those folks to work with. So I'm happy to be here. Just the team in general here at City Hall is also just very solid. So for me, I'm just excited and happy to be here. And like I said, I realize I still have a lot to learn and come up to speed on, and commit to doing my best for this community.
Thank you for those comments, but could you share with us what will happen next week in terms of farewelling Sally?
I may need Dave to help, and he may not know. I believe it's at 5:30 in this room. City Council is doing a community reception for Sally. And then I can't remember if it's actually at that point or early on in the council meeting where there's a little bit of a presentation and some other comments that will be made in a more formal venue. And the council meeting starts at 7. So
I believe that her farewell is going to be from 5:45 to 6:30. I believe there's going to be light hors d'oeuvres, and I think she is going to have her own presentation.
Oh, okay, that will be good.
I did a very good job.
which, I kind of get that, you want to help steer the narrative. What do you want people to remember you for?
Exactly. When you were talking about staff, are you still short a position or two?
We are actively recruiting for the senior planner position. I've got that posted out there on the Colorado APA website, the Colorado Municipal League website. I think it's ELGL is the website, Emerging Local Government Leaders. It's posted there, Facebook. Doing what we can. It's a good time to be a planner in the state because there are all kinds of job openings. If you're the one, it's like selling a house. It's a good time to sell, but if you're looking to buy, not so good. So if you're looking for a planner, a little rough, but if you're the planner looking for a job, you're in good shape. And then we did hire a code enforcement official, and he started earlier this past week, and then unfortunately got put into a quarantine situation. You gotta love, today's efforts. So we're hoping to continue onboarding him in the coming weeks. It's just like everything else right now, just going to take longer than what anybody wants it to. But we're very excited by him, his background, good common sense, nice ability to converse with people. I think he's going to be a lovely addition to our team also.
I guess the last question I have for you right now, Karen, is would you be opposed that if we reached out to you individually and say, can we sit down for 20 minutes, half hour?
I would welcome that, actually. And I've been meeting with various people in the community. I know before Sally retired at the end of December, there was a blur of meetings that she was really working diligently to introduce me to a number of the folks doing development projects here. And so that first month really was all about the crossover with Sally. And so, yeah, I actually do want to sit down and visit with each of you and you also, Lee, just to kind of hear your thoughts on Woodland Park and get to know you all a little bit better, because I do look forward to working with you in this commission.
So we just contact you and say, what's a good time?
Actually, I can make all those phone calls and get them set up. Or I may have one of the gals do that, but we'll get those put together.
Do you have the same contact information that Sally had, or did they change your numbers?
I still have the same phone number as Sally. I'm still waiting on business cards. So if you can spell my last name, you can get to me via email. And actually, I sent that email out the other day, advising you all about our mask mandates here in City Hall. So you do have that.
Anything else, Sarah?
Okay, I'm done.
Welcome to continue. Any other comments from commissioners? Well, it's 7:56 and meeting is now adjourned.
Welcome, Ken.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.